14 days can be a long time, but if it's all you have to negotiate between two sworn enemies, it suddenly seems like nothing. Donald Trump created a window for diplomacy when he announced that he would decide in the next 2 weeks whether there would be a U.S. intervention in Iran. And the Europeans were the first to seize the opportunity. Iran's foreign minister came to Geneva for talks with the chief diplomats from France, Germany, the UK, and the EU. It was the first face-to-face meeting between Western and Iranian officials since the start of the conflict. The French president said European countries prepared a comprehensive negotiation offer for a new nuclear deal with Iran. Well, after the meeting, officials agreed that Iran seemed open to resolving the conflict with Israel diplomatically, and they agreed to keep on talking. But British Foreign Minister David Lammy also urged the Iranians to talk to the Americans.
We are keen to continue ongoing discussions and negotiations with Iran, and we urge Iran to continue their talks with the United States. This is a perilous moment, and it is hugely important that we don't see regional escalation of this conflict.
UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres underlined what was at stake at a meeting of the United Nations Security Council in New York.
The world is watching with growing alarm. We are not drifting toward crisis. We are racing toward it. We are not witnessing isolated incidents. We are on course to potential chaos. The expansion of this conflict could ignite a fire that no one can control. We must not let that happen.
Saeed Ghasseminejad is a senior advisor on Iran and financial economics at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. He was born and raised in Iran, but fled the country after being imprisoned for political dissidence. Welcome to the day. It's great to have you on. Talks on peace or how to pave the way forward and avoid an escalation took place in Geneva today. What do you make of these efforts to de-escalate?
Look, President Trump wants to gain the goal through diplomatic negotiation. If the regime does that, what he said as unconditional surrender, that's not bad. But the regime will never change. Look, it's in its DNA to hate, to go after dissidents, to try to support terrorism, to try create chaos in the region. So it won't change. It will only buy time for the regime. And let's say the regime stays in power after this military conflict. What will happen? On the nuclear issue, it will rebuild. On the ballistic missile, it will rebuild. On the support for terrorism, it will rebuild. Yes, it will, delay what it does, but it doesn't solve the problem. The problem will be solved only if this regime is gone. The lasting peace comes only after the regime is gone.
How would that work, especially in the context of this military confrontation now?
So the military confrontation, I look at the targeting. There are like 4 types of targets. One is nuclear. Israel at the beginning, it focused on that. In a methodical way, it still continues doing that. As you know, Fordo and Natanz are still there. They have been hit, but they are not destroyed. The other one is the regime's missile. Its offensive and defensive capabilities. Israel has gone after that. The third type of targets are the economic infrastructure. We haven't seen a campaign of going after economic infrastructure, but because we are collecting the data, we see that some economic infrastructure has been hit. But the fourth type of targets are political leadership and institutions, plus the domestic security, the oppression machine. Over the past few days, we have seen Israel going after the suppression machine, the Basij headquarters, the police headquarters, the police special forces headquarters, the heads and deputy commander of the IRGC intelligence, the Ministry of Security and Intelligence. So the only thing that has kept this regime in power since over the last few years, because as you know, over the last few years, there have been several big waves of protest. The only thing that kept the regime in power is its oppression machine and the violence and naked use of force. So if this military campaign weakens the regime, its oppression machine, it weakens the command and control, it weakens the political leadership, we will see people coming to the street, in my view. We will see defection from the regime. And at that point, I think there is a very high chance that the regime will crumble.
Who's to say that what comes after the Mullah regime is not worse for Iran and for Israel, that maybe, not the Revolutionary Guard could seize power, for example?
So one of the things that is happening now is that the Revolutionary Guard has been decapitated. Israel has gone after its leadership. Israel is targeting their bases. Israel is weakening the IRGC, the other parts of the oppression machine. So the Revolutionary Guard at the end of this will not be in a great situation to seize power. On the other hand, Iranians right now have someone who can lead them. We have since 2017 the name Pahlavi coming up again and again. Like his name, Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi's name have been chanted frequently. His father's name, his grandfather's name, Reza Shah, bless your soul, has been a fixture of protest since 2017. So you have a leader. You have a leader that has name recognition, that has support. He I think 3 months ago, he gathered more than 35 political groups in Munich when he was supposed to be in the Munich Security Conference that was canceled by the pressure from the Islamic Republic, the pressure that they put on the German government. In that meeting, more than 35 groups, they signed an agreement, a 12-point agreement, talking about what? Talking about secular democracy, human rights, people's right to choose the form of government in a free and fair election, talking about their strategy, which is maximum pressure on the regime, maximum support for the Iranian people, maximum defection from the regime, maximum mobilization of Iranians outside and inside, and giving a plan, a vision to Iranian what will happen after the fall of the regime. And
just a disclaimer to our viewers, sorry to jump in there, a disclaimer for our viewers, you have been an advisor to Reza Pahlavi. He's the son of the Shah who was deposed in the Islamic Revolution of 1979. Not all of the Iranian opposition, of course, sees him as a potential leadership figure to move in after there would be regime change. We do actually have a soundbite of him calling on Iranians to rise up. Let's hear his message and then get back to you.
The regime's apparatus of repression is falling apart. All it takes now is a nationwide uprising to put an end to this nightmare once and for all. Now is the time to rise. The time to reclaim Iran.
He's calling on the Iranian people to rise up, but tell me, how are they supposed to do that while it's raining bombs, they're fearing for their lives, while all the usual repression that you know all too well by the regime continues?
So he's saying that the solution is for the Iranian people to rise up and to make their own decision. He's saying the war, he's saying the regime change from outside. It's not going to work. And no one wants to do a regime change from outside. Israel doesn't want to do an invasion. There will be no boots on the ground. US doesn't want to do it, and no one is calling for it. And no one is calling for nation building. But let me tell you about why majority of Iranians, look at him favorably. The reason is that when Iranians look at their lives under the Islamic Republic...
Sorry, that's not what I asked. I do want to know genuinely how Mr. Pahlavi and you, by the looks of it as well, expect for the Iranians to rise up right now while they are fleeing the country in fear for their lives and are also facing the usual repression inside of the country.
So it's not about just right now. It's about looking at the situation, seeing when the opportunity arises. I agree with you. When Tehran is being bombed, it's very difficult for people to go to street and do protests. But if the oppression machine, as I told you, a lot of these centers are being targeted. If the oppression machine is weakened enough, and you will see that when it's weakened. One thing is that a lot of them will be targeted. Another one is that a lot of people will not show up. And you see defection. When defection happens at a larger scale, that's the time that the Iranian people can go to street and bring down this regime.
If there were something like a revolution to start as a result of what you're suggesting would need to happen, a civil war is a not unlikely scenario. How would you feel about your country descending into civil war as a result of what you are suggesting here?
No one is calling for a civil war. That's why.
No, but it could be. There is still support for the regime, and there is an opposition that is very much divided. We have seen this play out in the past. So how would you feel if, what you're calling for now could have devastating consequences for your home country?
The real opposition is the Iranian people inside Iran. They are not divided, they are united. And that's why no one is calling for de-Baathification. That's why the Crown Prince is addressing members of the security forces, members of the intelligence community, members of the military, members of the government, saying that if you join the people, there is a place for you in the future Iran. In the future Iran, which will be free and will be prosperous. So you have two options: remain with this regime, which is now has taken Iran to this place. Iran is involved in a war. There is a lot of destruction. The other option is that join the people, join the campaign of defection, and you have future after the fall of the regime. No one wants to murder you. No one wants to torture you. If you have done something bad, maybe there will be justice. There will be courts based on human rights. At that point, if you have joined people, obviously those courts will consider that there is a place for you. And let me tell you, a lot of people who are in the government, they don't like the regime. And they have not done, they have not killed people, they have not murdered people. Those who are killing and murdering people, that's even inside the regime, inside the security force, that's a minority. And I think the majority of them, yeah.
We'll have to leave it there. We're running out of time, unfortunately. That was Saeed Ghasseminejad of the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. Thank you so much for taking all that time.
Thank you very much.
Simon Mabon is an expert on the Middle East and Iran. Specifically, I asked him what he thought Iran was looking for in these talks.
I think Iran is wanting to show that it is acting in good faith, that it is looking for and willing to accept a diplomatic way out of this conflict. We've heard about Iran sending messages to various places, various intermediaries to say we do not want to escalate further. But ultimately, it's not in just Iran's hands. I think Iran has to set a firm line as well to say that they cannot and will not continue to engage in diplomatic processes while they are under bombardment. And there are some legal questions, international legal questions, about whether Iran would be legally bound by any type of agreement if it was made under duress. So there's a lot going on here. A lot of it is performative, but a lot of it is substantive as well. So I think there is a degree of hope that a diplomatic breakthrough can be made, and it certainly seems that Iran wants to find a diplomatic resolution to this, and indeed its nuclear program. But that doesn't mean it's going to happen anytime soon or easily.
Yeah, you mentioned Iran's demands there. Now, that legal argument that you talked about aside, what is Iran's leverage right now, and how strong is their position in continuing this conflict?
Well, Iran doesn't have that much leverage at all right now, I would argue, in the sense that its allies across the region, what some are calling its proxies, Hezbollah, Hamas, the Iraqi PMUs, the private military units, and the Houthis are all weakened dramatically since October 7, 2023. So Iran is somewhat limited in terms of what it can do to respond to Israel, although it continues to launch various missile and drone attacks. I think we're approaching 20 now since the start of this round of conflict. So it doesn't have much to play with, but it can continue to show that it is going to continue to fight. And ultimately, that is tied up within the very essence of the Islamic Republic itself and the very essence of Shiism, the faith, the sect of Islam that Iran adheres to, which is bound up in ideas of resistance, of martyrdom, of sacrifice, and what it sees to be standing up to oppressors.
And we can get more from DW correspondent Jack Parrock in Brussels. Jack, did the Iranian foreign minister give any indication that this meeting in Geneva could be decisive in finding a solution to the conflict?
Not really, to be honest. And we now know that the talks have wrapped up and that probably we are not expecting a full statement to come out of it that the Iranians have signed on to. That's what diplomatic sources have been telling me. Now, that isn't unexpected at all. It wasn't expected that there would be some sort of grand joint statement and some collective action. But the talks have taken longer than we had expected them to. They've gone on for a number of hours. And I've been speaking to a few experts throughout the day, and that seems to suggest that some of the proposals that were put to the Iranians, potentially the proposal that was put forward by Emmanuel Macron's government, he's not there, the president, but the French foreign minister, that actually some of those suggestions may have been something that the Iranians would be considering and therefore wanted to talk further with some of the senior leadership back in Tehran. So it looks like there were some pretty serious discussions in Geneva, but what we knew from the Iranian foreign minister and what he said going into these talks is that they would not have a serious diplomatic discussion with anyone until Israel stopped sending bombs over and hitting targets in Iran.
Meanwhile, Donald Trump says he is still weighing up U.S. involvement in the conflict. Do the Europeans have his ear on this?
Yeah, that's the big question. How much power can the Europeans assert over Donald Trump and over Israel Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu? Now, David Lammy, the British Foreign Secretary, he said that this 2-week window that Donald Trump suggested he would be considering whether to use these big bunker buster bombs that would really destroy Iran's nuclear facilities that the Israelis want to use, but only the US have the capacity to use them. David Lammy said that gives a 2-week window for diplomacy. And that's why in this set of discussions that happened in Geneva, like I said, we didn't expect some big announcement. There are still many days left, well, 13 days left essentially, to try and see whether there can be a discussion, a diplomatic discussion. The Iranians, though, feel that the Americans, although not directly attacking them, are tacitly supporting the Israelis, and they want that support to stop. Donald Trump is very unlikely to sort of come out and change his position on Iran, who he's always been extremely, extremely critical of. A first step, though, the Europeans are pleased that they had the Iranian foreign minister, that they were able to have these discussions directly with him.
That was DW correspondent Jack Parrock, and what I'm assuming was a fly in our studio in Brussels. Thank you so much.